People in the NDP whom I spoke with said that that decision was made in advance of the press conference, that the video was even taped in advance, and that essentially it was your government's actions throughout the lockout and the events with CN that cemented the decision for them. And you could hear him speak to that a little bit in the video when he talked about basically that he accused your government of being too beholden to corporate interests to fight for people. Is there not merit to the NDP in deciding that they are firmly on the side of workers, deciding against your government on that, and ultimately continuing to prop it up in a formal agreement? Pardon me.
Why is she smiling?
Well, look, there was always space in the SACA for disagreement. I mean, that was actually what the Supply and Confidence Agreement was about. It was to work together on areas of agreement and to have the space to disagree where we disagreed. For him to say that he's in support of workers, I given what happened over the past couple of weeks, if those rail strikes had gone ahead, we would have seen massive layoffs in other industries and workers affected, and not to mention everyday Canadians who would have seen the economy ground to a halt. So it was a very important and responsible decision that we took. But I do find the timing of it odd. And politics is more of an art than a science. And if he really wants to stand up to Poilievre, doing exactly what he's asking is maybe not the best way to go about it.
But again, and I take your point on the breadth of the impact on the rest of the economy. The workers in those incidents the whole thing as it unfolded did have a very specific set of concerns that ultimately your government decided to force arbitration on. Can you see how they would interpret that as a move that was anti those workers in particular?
Well, I think what's important is there has been a lot of bargaining at the table. But at the same time, we have to look out for the entire Canadian economy and for Canadians overall. And that's what our government has done since we've been elected in 2015, is always put Canada and Canadians first. It's disappointing that Mr. Singh is deciding right now that he's putting himself and his own political interests, or what he thinks is a benefit to him politically first, and putting at risk, the really important programs that Canadians have come to rely on, that we know that the Conservatives under the leadership of Pierre Poilievre will cut and get rid of, things like dental care and pharmacare and childcare, things that matter to Canadians. So it's unfortunate, but that's the decision of the NDP, that they're putting their own political interests ahead of the interests of Canadians.
If you feel that all that is at risk, and I take from that, you mean that if Poilievre is elected and ultimately beats your party or the NDP,
which he will,
that will come to fruition. Does that mean, can Canadians interpret from those comments that you think the likelihood of an election has just increased?
Well, it's a really good question, and I don't know if that's true or not. I guess we'll have to see how things play out over the next couple of weeks. One of the things that the NDP statement said, and remember, there haven't been many conversations about this, but that they're going to take things on a case-by-case, vote-by-vote basis. We're going back to kind of minority parliaments as usual. The SACA is not a first in Canadian history, but it's the first time that an agreement like this has happened at the federal level. So minority parliaments have existed without these kinds of agreements. So, my job now as House Leader is to work with the opposition parties. And, that could be the NDP on some things, it could be the Bloc on some things, it might even be the Conservatives on other things, to continue to deliver for Canadians. So that's what I'm focused on. And, there's still elements, I think, that are priorities for the NDP that they will want to see followed through. But that's going to be up to them now, I guess.
When you say, and the Prime Minister has said this frequently, including today, that you're going to continue to deliver for Canadians, what exactly does that mean? Because I think the message that they're sending through public opinion polling is that they don't think you're delivering for them.
Well, there are really big new programs that didn't exist 9 years ago or 8 years ago. So we are going to continue to implement childcare. I was the Minister of Families that spent a lot of time negotiating those agreements. It's not done yet. There's still more work to do. Dental care. Yes, it's being rolled out across the country, but it's not done yet. There's still more work to do. When it comes to the green transition, things that we hear from Canadians that they like those actual policies, and those programs are important and meaningful for them. But they're not done. We still have to work with the provinces and territories to implement some of them. We're still working to make sure that those policies are in place at the federal level and to deliver those actual tangible results to Canadians. So we've begun those process. They're in implementation, but it's not done yet. And certainly what I hear from Canadians and people in my community is that those are things that they like and they want to see continue. But I think what Canadians also can understand and see is that those programs are at risk if the Conservatives come into power. So, look, our job as the government, we are in government right now, is to continue to govern effectively for Canadians. It's to continue to deliver the policies and the programs that we have put in place, and to make sure that we're doing that effectively. And that's my job as House Leader, is to make Parliament work and to continue to govern for Canadians.
But it's that last part around effectiveness that I think is the point Jagmeet Singh is trying to make today, or it appears to me is saying is kind of the friction point between his party and your party. You name a number of programs. You say you've implemented them, but there's still a way to go before they fully take effect. Think of childcare, for example. I'm not taking away from the impact it's had so far, but only 30% of kids across the province, a recent study showed, actually have access to those spaces. There is a severe shortage. When you talk about bettering the cost of living, for example, or issues around affordability, at the same time, GDP per capita under your government in 6 of the last 7 consecutive quarters has declined. That's the steepest decline outside of a recession. Again, why do you keep saying you're going to continue delivering on stuff that Canadians doesn't feel is actually changing their life for the better? You've had 9 years.
Just today, Vashi, the Bank of Canada did issue another interest rate cut. And these are because of policies that we have put in place. I mean, we came out of the COVID recession, the COVID pandemic, into a very difficult world. And we needed to make sure that we were being fiscally responsible to ensure that we could get global inflation under control. The interest rate cut today is an important one. Hopefully we'll continue to see more of those. Childcare, yes, there are more spaces to create, but that very statistic that you quoted actually demonstrates an increase in spaces since the National Childcare Program came into effect. And just today, the Prime Minister was in Newfoundland announcing the very first agreement for a national school food policy. So these are things that are important, that are working.
You promised, with great respect, Minister, you promised that national school program in 2021. You announced it in April. 5 months later, you're making the first announcement with one Liberal government, essentially, that remains provincially. You have not come to agreements with other provinces across the country. We don't know exactly how soon that will all be implemented. It's the same thing over and over, right? And I take your point, it's not nothing,
in fairness,
but you're just telling people more of the same is coming.
But in fairness, these things take time,
but
right?
You've had 9 years.
It was 50 years of advocacy for childcare before we were able to get a national program in place. And now, real, tangible, 50% fee reduction across the board. Almost more than half of the provinces and territories have reached $10 a day. We have seen thousands of new spaces come online. These are real things. Dental care. There are, hundreds of thousands of people who have now accessed dental care that didn't a year ago. So these are real things. School food, we announced it in the budget, and now the first agreement has been signed. Constructive conversations are going on with provinces across the country. So these are good things that are making a positive difference in people's lives. And those are the things that we're going to continue to do. For Mr. Singh to say that he's been so successful in getting things done because we've had a productive agreement, but now it's time to rip that up because he thinks it'll improve his own political fortune. It's not about Canadians. It is about his own political fortune. Because if he wanted to see these things through, we would still be in the supply and confidence agreement. But he is thinking right now that this is about him and the NDP's political fortune. It's not about Canadians. My job, the job of the Liberal government right now, and what we are focused on is delivering for Canadians. We're going to do that. As Mr. Poilievre and Mr. Singh focus on their own political fortunes, we're going to do the job of governing for Canadians.
I'm out of time. I'm going to leave it there. I appreciate your time as always, Minister. Thank you so much.